Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Bother the Father with your priests, Father Schneier, Father Schrader, and Father Gerber. We're happy to be with you to answer your questions that you've submitted. And these questions deal a little bit with the sacraments I would say mainly the sacrament of marriage and maybe baptism vicariously. We'll sort of get to that here in a minute. But yeah, a lot of questions dealing with the sacrament of marriage that I think are really good. So let's dive in kind of with a big one. This one's a meaty one and a good one. How far can I push to have a grandchild or great-grandchild baptized? Parents have been raised Catholic, education and all, but since college they don't attend Mass. I'm praying that they return to the practice of the faith in a few years when kids reach school age. This is a very, very common question that we get asked by a lot of people, and we know that this is a common situation among a lot of our parishioners too. So, Father Schrader, Father Gerber, what do we do?
Yeah, so one thing I would say don't do, I have heard of grandparents and great-grandparents, maybe they tell their kids, take the weekend or go have a night out, and while they're gone, they baptize them in the sink or in the tub, and I would say don't do that. The church in her...
Not because baptism is bad.
Yeah, but an important part of baptism and the rite of baptism is actually asking the parents and godparents to promise to take a vow to raise this child in the practice of the faith, because the church knows just baptizing the child in normal circumstances isn't enough. They need to be raised. They need to come up in a culture of faith. And if kids are secretly baptized by family members in their homes, they now have the obligation to live the Catholic faith, but they're not going to be given the culture or the support,
tools.
or the education to fulfill those obligations. So it is a really painful thing in family life when a grandparent looks and says, I want them to have this faith, and we know the grace and the goodness that comes from baptism, but the parents also need to be a part of that process. So that would be the first thing, is don't secretly go and baptize these children. If they're ever in a serious illness or in danger of death, the church, in her generosity, gives anyone the ability to baptize someone in danger of death and to bring them into God's life. So that's something that if God forbid that would ever be necessary,
you can do that.
Yeah, you don't need to wait to bring them to church. You don't need a priest necessarily, but it shouldn't just be done because there's a disagreement within the family about raising a child in the faith.
Yeah. So that's kind of the first thing we would say on that.
And I would say there has to be a spirit of hopefulness too. Like, you're praying the rosaries, you're going to Mass, you're offering your family to the Heavenly Father, and remember that God is more concerned about that child than even you are, and He's going to give this family all the grace necessary too. And so we have to be hopeful as well that this family will come to the faith, and our joyful hope is also going to inspire them to have their child baptized and not just kind of use baptism as just kind of this magic bullet, because even the Catechism notes that, well, God binds Himself to the sacraments. That is, where the sacraments are, God is there. God is not bound by them. So, there are children who die in miscarriage. We entrust them to the merciful Father. So there is this hopefulness that pervades the doctrine of the Catholic Church, and we need to have that similar hopefulness. Just remember too, I guess my second point would be, why hasn't the parent gotten their child baptized? What is the disconnect there? And that's a good question. Some people might just say, well, I want my child to be able to choose their religion on their own, right? Thinking that baptism is us choosing God, and there's a quality there of us choosing God, but really what baptism boils down to is the Heavenly Father choosing that child, saying, I want you to be part of the family. And so sometimes it's a matter of removing that obstacle from, like if you're a grandparent, removing that from your parent, from your children's hearts of they think we're imposing a religion or wanting the child to be able to choose, but really we're saying, no, we're just letting the Father choose this child.
And I would also say, parents sometimes say, as you said, I want my child to be able to do that for themselves. Well, there are plenty of things that young parents do for or to their kids because they know it's for their good.
Right.
You probably got them their shots against measles and all those things. You're not going to wait till they're 10 years old and say, I'm going to let my kid decide whether they want, measles shot
To
or
brush
not.
their teeth.
To brush their teeth? No. You have them do it because you know it's good for them. And this is one of
Right.
those things.
I tell people, parents, over at schools, all the time, of, when we have that kind of thought of, I'm going to let my child decide, we have actually made a choice for the child. We have shown that religion is just one choice among many, when religion is not one choice among many. Actually, it is the choice par excellence. So like when we're just saying to the kids, just you can choose it if you want it. Well, I think that already betrays the parents' belief that it isn't just that it isn't all that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we have to kind of reveal that the Father wants this child, that there is something that happens in baptism. And so there's a conversation, I think, that has to be had. Not just simply we want them baptized because we want them to be Catholic, or we want them to be baptized because if they don't, they're going to hell. Which is not. But there's actually something deeper that deals with love. And I think these younger generations are more moved by the appeal of there's something loving going on in baptism.
Mm-hmm. There's also a practical aspect when people kind of clandestinely baptize family members. That's not recorded in a parish.
Right.
No one knows about it. And down the road, it really becomes difficult.
Very problematic.
Yeah, it becomes very problematic because
things like marriages, confirmations, all of those things.
So these are things, the church keeps record, every parish keeps a record of every baptism and sacraments that happen within its boundaries. So that's the other just pastoral thing I would say is don't secretly baptize, family members kind of just because you want them to be Catholic now, because now they are Catholic. We don't know they're Catholic, and down the road, if they want to receive other sacraments, like you said, it just sets up a whole chain reaction that we don't have any way of figuring out. So.
Well, good. I think that's a very good answer on the lot of nuances of that question. We had a couple of questions about contraception and about birth control and what they relate to. Some of them very specific. Specific situations, and others a little bit more generic, but kind of just kind of do one answer at least on this, and then if you have any other specific questions, obviously please come to us if you have any questions about these things. But the main church teaching, especially as it relates to contraception, is no artificial birth control for when there is birth control happening, or when birth control is a result of those methods. That's kind of the basic kind of baseline answer, so to speak, that it can, I think, a lot of times serve as the touchstone for those questions. If you have any other questions about the nuances of these things, as regards to specific circumstances and situations, obviously don't hesitate to contact us about those things. But that's kind of the church's main answer.
And I would give two very, very brief points, and then we can go to the other questions. And that is, this is not a prohibition against things are artificial. We're not anti-science. No. We use, you can use Advil and Tylenol, like just not with this regard, but we use we're not
Scientologists.
Right.
That's also a thing.
We employ scientific means, for improving the body all the time. So we're not anti-science. This is not anti-artificial. So that's not the reason why we're saying we can't use contraception. And secondly, the church, whenever she's teaching on these moral issues, sensitive ones at that, you'll find at heart that really the church is always safeguarding what real love is, the deepness of love. That might not seem like a connection right here, right now, given that we're kind of just speaking introductorily or generically right now. But if you kind of peel this teaching back later on as you explore it, you'll find that really what's going on is the church is protecting what love really is. So just to make those two items very clear.
Yeah. Especially when you think of marriage and family life and married love, intimate love, is a reflection of God's love. Now when you start introducing things that limit that love, or say this love is conditional, or is no longer open to life, with that, maybe this isn't people's intention, but now the image of that love has been in some ways defiled, or even becomes a mockery of what divine love would be if it followed that same example. So yeah, a lot of times we see the very specific application in our case. We don't always think about how it then poorly reflects God's love, which is what the sacrament and what married life is meant to do.
And when people don't use contraception, and in full disclosure, I mean, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
It is.
We're not denying that.
No, and it's so yeah. So in a sense, there's not rose-colored glasses on us priests, lives. Like we talk with a lot of married couples and see the sacrifices that are entailed and the creativity that is required of couples when they are not using contraception. It can very much be a very large cost that they carry.
But the things that are the most sacrificial are often the most worth it.
Absolutely.
And especially as it relates to the vocation of marriage and how that love is meant to reflect God's love. There's nothing more beautiful and truly fulfilling for us than for us to be reflecting the love that God has. And that should definitely be the case that's what the church holds out for every married couple. So.
But I think in our culture and day and age, most people are encouraged to express their intimacy as a married couple mostly in the physical sense.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, a very powerful and beautiful expression of intimacy, but God gave the human person, really 4 modes of intimacy. There's spiritual intimacy, intellectual intimacy, and emotional intimacy, as well as physical intimacy. And what I see as a priest is oftentimes couples have never or they have not developed those other modes of intimacy. And that's the beauty of God, is knowing that there are all these ways for couples to express this love for each other. And it's actually handicaps their relationship when we only focus on one and don't know how to express. So that's the beauty of the church teaching, is it helps couples express love for each other.
Yeah, much more holistically.
Yeah, on all 4 levels instead of just one.
Yeah. All right, next question, sort of related to this. Why is there so much pressure from the church to have children? I think maybe a good answer to say is, the church will, at the end of the day, leave the decision on whether to have children in the hands of 2 parties, so to speak, the parents and God. And the church trusts parents and their decision making. That's why natural family planning allows for those types of decisions to be made. But I would also say this: I don't think the church puts so much pressure on parents to have children as the world puts pressure on parents not to have kids or to not have very many children. So that when we live in this society that is just very much pressuring parents to either not have children or to not have very many, when the church just simply says, hey, have kids, it sounds huge. It sounds like big pressure. I mean, you were even talking earlier about, ordination to the priesthood. Yeah. The world nowadays, would say that being a priest is stupid, it's dumb, you shouldn't do it, and hates the clergy, to the point that when the church just says, hey, consider becoming a priest, it feels different.
Right,
it feels so different, and it feels like a lot of pressure. But I would genuinely say that the pressure from the world not to have kids or to have a smaller family is far greater than any pressure that the church might seemingly place on families to have kids.
Yeah, and I think in addition, like as soon as that is said, you consider having more children, we as human beings kind of go to the all or nothing thought, like, well, I guess I have to have, does that mean I have to have 12?
14?
14, right? Like some generations past. And well, no, we're called to be generous. And we don't know, again, like you said, we don't know if God's going to give that many or not, right? But there's also, I think, this sense too that we do live in a different age where people have this expectation, or at least I have encountered this in a few parishes where there's some people who want the house in the early part of their marriage that their parents had later on that they worked up to, and they didn't realize, there was the apartment and then the 2-bedroom home, and and even in past ages, like right now, I have seen so many families where they have one child per bedroom, but in previous ages you would have a couple pairs of bunk beds, and you might even turn the living room into a bedroom sort of thing. And so when we say like have more kids, people are like, well, gosh, I have two, but how am I going to have 4 bedrooms in my house, and so forth? And it seems so impossible, but really, maybe there's also a call to a more simple and holistic.
It's a change of expectations.
Yeah, it's a holistic way of life where we're looking at our way of living and our expectations for life.
Yeah, I would say 2 things kind of building on that. One is sometimes we're operating out of the standards of the world to say, the world says that every child that I bring into the world must have, this much in their college account. They must have these types of clothes. They must have the latest electronics. If we buy into the world standard, then we cannot have many children because there's so much that has to be provided, and we have to be the ones providing. But when we go with God's, if we kind of give the benefit of the doubt towards life, and we say, God, I'm going to be generous with you, but then you have to be generous with me and my spouse to provide for the life that you bless us with, then the calculus changes. And once again, you have to do this in a spirit of prayer. But on a personal level, I know my parents made many sacrifices to bring each of us and all of us into the world. The beautiful thing now is that the things that they gave up, the vacations and the nice cars and the big house, in order to give us siblings, now we are giving back to my parents to help provide for them in their later years. So they're getting those things that they gave up at the time to have us, but they're getting them at the hands of their children.
And getting it in a greater share because there's more to go around.
Yeah, so I think Mother Teresa and John Paul II kind of said, when you think about what you want to give, the greatest gift you want to give to your children, it's not things, it's not money, it's not earthly treasure, it's actually another sibling. So if you were kind of in that gray area of saying, we have 2 kids or we have 3 kids, don't know if we can have any more, that's the greatest gift you can give to your children. And I look at my siblings, and I don't know where I could cut the line. I mean, it's like any of them.
Oh, come on! I'm sure there's more.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure.
But it's like
I'm sure there's a list somewhere.
Yeah. Each one of
I'll
them
look around
is,
his office. I'll find the list.
Yeah. Each one of them has made and been such a blessing, and it's not like, oh well, after 6 we could have done without the rest. So anyway, like you both have mentioned, it's not that every family's going to have 14.
No.
But many times we're the ones limiting the way that God can bless us, because we're saying, God, you can only bless me this much, or you can only bless my family this much. So when in doubt, when it's a 50-50 call, err on the side of generosity, err on the side of life, because one of the primary purposes of marriage is to bring new life into the world. It's not like just something that is possible. It's actually one of the primary
purposes. It's one of the questions that the priest asked the couple at the wedding itself. So
yes.
And then finally, what's the best advice you have for parents?
Well, for me, if you don't mind me going first, I would just simply say, so we've been talking a lot about kids. I think one of the temptations is to spend all of our energy and free time on the kiddos. And there's important things that we do, of course, right? But sometimes at the exclusion of working on the marriage, having a date night once a month at least, getting some quality time in. So, I think my advice would be is make sure that you're working on the marriage as well, because if we give all the kids everything over here, but don't give them a good marriage, like a good sight of like an affectionate couple, or even if that breaks apart, I think we're undermining everything else that we've given them. I mean, marriage is the civilizing force of humanity, and I think that's the most important thing to give them. So really have quality time together. Take some time to waste time together. That'd be my.
And I would kind of build on that. Just as you need to have a healthy marriage, you also need to have an authentic and healthy relationship with God.
Amen.
Yeah.
Kids learn when they see mom and dad praying,
Mm-hmm.
when they see mom and dad trying to put God at the center of their lives. I just think of so many times with my parents, and they're not mystics, they're not writing spiritual tomes on how to be a saint, but I learned so much from just seeing mom and dad try, to try to pray the rosary, or to pray before meals, or to go to confession, and take us with them to see, wow, mom and dad have to say sorry to God for things. These little moments of having your own personal relationship with God teach children that God is still part of your life when you get older, and still guides you. And God, if you give God 15 minutes a day, He actually helps you order your day. He makes your remaining 23 and 3/4 hours, He makes what needs to fit. And maybe hopefully it's more than 15 minutes, but I guess we can get so caught up in all the things and expectations and things we got to get done. But if you have a relationship with God and you give Him His due, He helps show you the rest of what you need to get done, and gives you patience with that difficult child, and gives you mercy for your spouse when they frustrate you. So
Absolutely.
that would be the one thing, is if you can maintain some sort of relationship with God, it makes the rest of your life better ordered and more possible.
And I would say this one's kind of a practical one, and it's a time when I find all of this sort of coalescing together. Have dinner together, as best as you can, especially once the kids have baseball practice and all those things. Have dinner together, and pray together at the dinner table. That's as a kid, that's when I found all of those things coming together, praying together as a family, just interacting with one another and talking about life, but also just those virtues. That's where so many just teaching moments happen at the dinner table. We talk about things that were going on in the world, and people that needed prayers for various things and difficult things that people were going through. Have dinner together on a regular basis. Not because I like food, but just have dinner together as a family, even later on. Always important to do.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be perfect.
No, my goodness.
Like not even just dinner, but prayer. If you're trying to do a decade of the Rosary and the kids are running around,
okay, we're just doing a decade tonight.
That's okay. Home life. You guys know it is not always going to be clean and perfect, and that's okay. You just trying and doing it that's gonna reward you in spades. So
well, and you said the home is where mom and dad that's your castle. And you set the tone, and no one makes anyone sign up for teams or activities. Yeah. So there needs to be a certain kind of refuge that's cultivated in the home, where it's a place for, like you said, time to visit, time to grow, time to observe, all those good things. So.
Well, good. Hope those answered some burning questions in your hearts. Again, if you have a question that you want us to answer, go to the IW website and click on that Bother the Father button and submit your question. We'll answer it in a future episode.
Wait, before you say it, I just want to say this. And smash the subscribe button.
Yes.
I've always wanted to say that.
Smash that like button, like, click, subscribe. I've always wanted to say that. So anyway, hope you have a great day. Take care. God bless.